Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website, taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thanks for having us.
Post-election in Canada, $600 million plus spent to get the exact same result as we got in the last election, more or less, giving a couple of seats here and there that might change because of mail-in ballots. But it's the same show. Was it worth $600 million?
Depends on who you ask. I don't know if anybody's happy, frankly. If you're a big Justin Trudeau cheerleader, he didn't win a majority. If you think that the Conservative Party's dedication to race to the center was going to win them the 905 and pick up a whole bunch of Metro Vancouver seats and not lose them any support in the West, that didn't work either. Jagmeet Singh and his NDP didn't really make any gains, and the Greens lost their leader. So I don't know any party person or main loyal voter who's super thrilled with the results all around. And if you look at $600 million, if you want to put that into perspective, you could hire 1,000 full-time paramedics here in British Columbia and pay their full-time salaries for 10 years for what that just cost.
And we do have a paramedic shortage in BC. In fact, it could be all the way across Canada, because I know there are days in Calgary where they don't have any available ambulances to take calls.
Exactly, and that's a joke. We're living in an advanced society. We are in a G7 country. The idea that we can pay middle managers and healthcare bureaucrats hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, we pour millions of dollars into healthcare a year, and they can't figure out how to hire paramedics and how to coordinate their ambulances, it's just indicative of a bunch of major problems we have here in Canada. So yeah, it depends on who you ask, but I don't know anybody that is really thrilled with the outcome of the election. And hopefully going forward, the next one, we can talk about really substantive issues.
Now, also, one of the big complaints about this election was hours-long lineups. A lot of people gave up and didn't vote, and it may discourage them from voting again. Elections Canada says, well, it was because of the pandemic, but they knew for a year and a half that they were going to have to do this again. Lots of other things run okay because of the pandemic or despite the pandemic. Why couldn't they have done a better job of organizing this whole thing? And of course, the conspiracy theory people are already biting at the ankles saying, well, was this an attempt to manipulate the vote, a la the way they do it in the U.S. with gerrymandering and bizarre voting rules?
And we don't want people losing trust in our voting system. Obviously, if there were problems, they should be taken seriously and investigated. But as of right now, it doesn't appear that there were, those kinds of problems. But there are definitely some bloody scheduling problems. I was listening to folks who usually do advance voting, who were all surprised that they didn't have wide open advance polls for the entire weekend. Why did they not have wide open advance polls for the Saturday and Sunday before the Monday vote day? That way people could actually space out their time and space themselves out and get in there and vote. And we've seen this movie before. We've had pandemic elections, as they call them, in provinces. Why didn't they just take notes from that? So if this is just an error on Elections Canada's side, then that's something that needs to be really looked at.
People need to be fired.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly.
They did a very bad job. They should be served 2 weeks' notice.
We need to find out what happened there. And then also, I want to know was there any political direction? Were they given any instructions by the government, either the politics side or the bureaucrat side, to do this, to restrict the access, to not have as many openings, that sort of thing? And if that's the case, then there really needs to be some questions answered. But fundamentally, if folks actually gave up and left and didn't vote, that's really bad. We can't have anybody turned away at a voting station who is legitimately allowed to vote and who wants to vote, who leaves out of frustration. But if I'm able to give anybody any comfort or solace on the actual way that they count votes, it's very simple. I've been a scrutineer a couple of times during a federal election, and it's simple and effective. The boxes never leave your sight. They're all stacked up there behind you that are full of the marked ballots. Once everything closes and everybody's done voting, they all stand around this massive table, people from all different parties and completely neutral observers, and they dump the boxes out, and everybody watches everybody else, and they count them in stacks. They hand count. And so that's why the voting process is quite trusted here in Canada.
When those voting slips come out, are they all jumbled up randomly? They're not stacked up neatly?
Oh, they're all, you literally dump them out of a box. It looks like piñata at a kid's birthday party.
Because I know Michael Rivero, a friend of the show, pointed out when they had the Scottish referendum, they dumped the boxes out and the ballots were neatly stacked one on top of the other. He said, maybe somebody filled those out in advance?
That's weird.
Yes.
Yeah, that's weird. No, when you dump open a ballot box, it looks like Christmas morning with the wrapping paper everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the part that takes the longest actually, because you need to grab them and turn them around and upside down so you can actually read them, and then you put them literally into piles. Like big piles, as if imagine you're putting paint chips together. If you're going to be renovating your house, you're like, this is the kitchen, this is the living room. They do the same thing. Here is it for the Liberals, here's the Conservatives, and they put them all in a pile, and then they count them, and then they count them again. And people are watching over their shoulders, and so that way if somebody writes Mickey Mouse across it or something like that, or it's obviously a spoiled ballot, that goes in the spoiled ballot.
Now, the woman who wrote the book Black Box, Voting, how voting machines can be hacked. She said one of the advantages of a hand-counted ballot where you make your own X is a handwriting analysis, an algorithm, an AI, can actually scan each ballot and tell if it was made by a different person every time. If the same person does it, it can tell. So it's, again, another way you can tell if there's been voter fraud, where one person's, filled out a bunch of ballots, or if they were all done by individuals. It can tell the difference from your X and my X.
That's interesting. But one of the reasons why, though, that we have voting registration is so that way when they ask for your name and they get your address, they take a look right down the list and they say, yeah, you're registered to vote here at this precinct, and you have a number next to that, and it's crossed out. And so that way, like, if you did that at one polling station and that's where you live, you can't just go, to the next neighborhood and try to vote there because you're not going to be on that list. That's not how it works.
The result now, the same kind of parliament, and all of the parties made various promises, all involving more of our taxpayer money. How much more is this Liberal minority supported by NDP kind of, rump party coalition, because that's what it was last time. What's it going to look like this time? And of course, the Bloc will support anything that gives a lot of money to Quebec.
Unfortunately, we're imagining it to be very similar to last time, which is no fiscal discipline, like none. We can't even. It's hard to even exaggerate how bad the spending is by the federal government, even before COVID. For people who are yelling at the radio or their podcast right now, saying, "Hey, what about COVID?" Well, even before COVID, in 2018. They spent more money than in any 1 year of the Second World War or the Korean War or our recessions. Yes, of course, adjusted for inflation. There was no emergency. There was no tsunami hitting us in 2018. It was just absolutely reckless spending, and it became permanent spending because they expanded the size of the federal government. And so now, same thing. Trudeau's driving, and we've got Jagmeet Singh in the passenger seat, saying where to go. So unfortunately, they're just going to keep spending. The key here, though, is will the bills start being reflected? Will the tabs start coming due and have people wake up and realize that this is not free and that it's catching up with them? We're seeing that right now with an element of inflation. So not all inflation is caused by this, but there's a strong element of it that if you deficit spend, so who's buying up those dollars? Who's buying up that deficit? Well, in large part, it can be the Bank of Canada, which then buys up the bonds. Well, that causes them to issue more money. So then you have more dollars out there in the system chasing too few things. So there aren't enough widgets out on the market in order to absorb all the extra money sloshing around. That is one element of inflation, and right now we've got it at around 4%. And for folks who don't know how that works, well, just imagine that your dollar, your buying power, the money you have in your coin purse is now worth 4% less when you go to buy stuff. And then in other elements like, pork products, chicken, that sort of thing, gasoline especially, they're seeing even higher inflation rates than what we've seen at 4%. When those things start becoming really evident and obvious, maybe enough Canadians will wake up and realize that, like, the party's over, bills coming due, the rent is being collected, and Trudeau will have some uncomfortable questions to answer.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, if you were organizing the government now after an election and running the finance department, what would you do to make sure Canadians are still looked after, but that we're not running up tremendous bills that will unlikely be paid for generations to come?
We would separate needs from wants, and our former federal director, Aaron Woodrick, did an excellent job. It's called Road to Recovery after COVID. It's on our website, and he gives all sorts of very good recommendations of how to climb out of this. It's not immediate, but you at least need to get the car turned around. So I encourage anybody to go read the document. The main highlights that I would take away from that include get rid of corporate welfare. So, for example, stop giving hundreds of millions of dollars to companies like Bombardier or to airline companies that turn around, gas their major employees or their run-of-the-mill employees and give their executives a massive pay bonus.
That would sound like Air Canada.
Exactly.
I know you didn't want to name names.
Sure.
Also,
well, no,
Air Canada.
I didn't want to leave them out just in case.
Yeah.
There might have been other airlines that we aren't aware of. That's
of course.
Why. But yeah, stop handing out massive amounts of corporate welfare. And for folks who find that term offensive, well, take it up with Stephen Lewis, because he, our friend on the left, is the one that coined that term, and it's something that we agree with our friends on the left about. So stop handing out millions and millions of dollars to the wealthiest corporations. Loblaws. Why did they give them millions of dollars to buy refrigerators? Why did they give millions of dollars to the Ford Motor Company? It's one of, the top companies on the planet for profit. Stop handing tax dollars to that. And then apart from corporate welfare, stop wasteful spending. And for folks who don't think that we're still encouraging wasteful spending, we are. We are still spending millions of dollars on something called the Mission Cultural Fund. It's part of foreign affairs in Ottawa. If you can believe it, we're spending millions of dollars on the Mission Cultural Fund. They do dumb stuff like fly Canadian chefs all around the world. If an ambassador in any part of the world picks up the red phone and says, I'm hankering for some Canadian cuisine, we fly them there first class to cook for them. It's one of the craziest things ever.
Didn't Trudeau fly an East Indian chef into India?
Sure did.
Yeah.
To cook Indian food while he was dressing up in Indian clothes. Which was a global embarrassment. We need to stop spending money on that nonsense, and then we can get back down to basics. And so we really need to separate our needs from our wants. And it's on a smaller scale, but it's really meaningful because it's symbolic. Politicians need to quit taking pay hikes in the middle of crises. So in the depths of the pandemic, when lots of us were losing our jobs or seeing our salaries, being clawed back and scaled down, in some cases for more than a year for some of us workers, politicians took 2 pay hikes on Parliament Hill. Now, it doesn't add up to the deficit, but it matters at least symbolically, because when they turn around and say we're all in this together, we're bloody well not. So they need to stop doing things like that, and I think we will get back to balance. Unfortunately, what we were disappointed in is during the election campaign, barely any attention was given to where this money is supposed to be coming from for these spending provinces. And the only promise that we heard about balancing a budget came from the Conservatives, and even that, it was pretty flimsy. They said they were gonna try to balance the budget within 10 years, and they were banking all of that savings on a robust economy. So that means it would have to be really rosy, firing on all cylinders, and they would make up the money because of higher employment, higher salaries, and therefore higher income taxes.
And over 10 years, you could probably anticipate 2 recessions.
Exactly. And who knows with all the craziness that's going on right now. Nobody saw COVID coming, so God forbid we ever wind up in a situation like that as it started out again. So yeah, it was disappointing just to hear basically from all the major leaders going, let's spend more. Folks, we're going to wind up with a deficit crisis, very similar to what happened when Jean Chrétien was Prime Minister and Paul Martin was Finance Minister. Folks need to remember what that felt like, because they slashed healthcare transfer to the provinces because they were in a massive deficit crisis. Saskatchewan alone, I think they closed 14 hospitals. We don't want to see that happen. So they need to start making adult decisions now.
And I noticed one of the fallouts here as Donna Friesen was going across Canada as part of the global national coverage, how one of Toronto's biggest suburbs only has 1 hospital. It reminds me so much of Surrey, BC's biggest suburb outside of Vancouver, 1 hospital.
Yep.
And how that's causing a choke point. My wife, Winona Kent, is a great researcher. That's why she writes great mystery novels. And she said, why do we have a shortage of doctors? Well, it's because of the way they're paid. If you're a GP, you get paid per patient you see, but you have to pay a receptionist,
Bingo.
a nurse, and overhead. If the government owned the clinic and paid the help staff, then we'd have enough GPs. But a lot of people, a lot of graduates would rather just work at a walk-in clinic so they don't have that overhead.
Yep. And it's one of those things a lot of folks don't realize, that in some cases, the private GP has to run their own show. It's all on their own ticket. And because of that lack of understanding and confusion, we wind up with really muddled policy. To your point of how we wind up with, for example, a shortage of hospitals in areas that have been growing steadily. It's not like they just suddenly arrived. It's like, hey, all of a sudden overnight, bam, Surrey exists. No, we've seen a steady increase in population in that region now for probably the last 20 years.
They get 1,000 people a month.
Perfect. Exactly. And we know that. And so this is where it gets down to it. We'll put it this way. We pay people a lot of money to keep an eye on this stuff. We pay not just the politicians who are always out there for your votes, and sometimes they'll change, every 4 years because they're the ones elected. No. The permanent government. We pay
Stats Canada.
Thank you. We pay bureaucrats, we pay statisticians, we pay managers, we pay academics, we pay panels, we pay inquiries. They write Royal Commission reports on this stuff. We have committees on this. This shouldn't surprise us. This stuff shouldn't blindside us. We should be able to have adult conversations and say, hey, on the horizon, this population is growing at this rate. We're going to need these services for these regions. Let's allocate funding now. Let's start planning for land purchases now. Let's start working that out. We pay these people hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases to know this stuff. But quite often, it seems like they're just making it up on the fly, and that's not acceptable. We need more, if I can't stand using this word, but we do need more synergy between departments here so that we don't get surprised.
BC highways, transportation, they plan for today. They don't plan for 50, 100 years down the road. Don't they know that between 23 and 46,000 people a year move into Greater Vancouver? Why aren't you planning for that now?
Because it's just not expedient. And for the politicians who say, I have to go get votes, well, what about the other folks who are in departments that don't have to face the ballot box? Plan for it now. Other countries do this, like other democracies and other advanced nations do plan ahead. So they need to start doing that. And that will save everybody money. It will save people headaches. It won't be perfect because nothing is, but they have to start doing a much better job of it.
And I don't know, might be a little off topic here, but using cable cars for rapid transit. A lot of big cities around the world, Sao Paulo, Brazil does it. And one of the advantages of using aerial rapid transit is that you don't have to buy all the land that it's on. You just need to buy where the stanchions are. And you fly over top of everybody else's property, so you save a lot of money doing it, and you don't have to deal with the other traffic. So you get 2 bonuses there.
Well, that sounds fun. If there were a way for us to do it without bankrupting ourselves and make it useful.
But you see, it's a lot cheaper than buying, making a SkyTrain line where you have to buy every square inch that it's on.
Exactly. That really sounds like a good idea, but let's figure out how to do it so we can actually save money and save people time. If another country, if another jurisdiction has done it, we need to learn from it.
But we never do.
I know.
It's like legal pot rollout. All you had to do is go to California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado to see what worked and didn't work there. But BC's example is, we took the worst example of every one.
I know.
Let's make it really hard to do and hard to roll out. And Alberta, who was against legal pot, has the most legal pot shops, and the province makes hundreds of millions on it. I don't know. I think BC might still be losing money on it. And who else but the government could lose money selling drugs?
I didn't realize this. You're saying that Alberta is beating British Columbia in weed?
Oh, absolutely.
That's embarrassing.
Well, they did the same thing with liquor stores when they made that free enterprise.
But seriously.
Edmonton went from, I think, 9 liquor stores to 400.
I still am shocked that Alberta is beating us in weed. No, we have to have some sort of
Albertans are free enterprisers.
They are. And I guess it doesn't matter what the substance is. They'll just go for it.
If there's money, let's do it.
But really, if people want to, explore cable cars, please, for the love of Pete, don't spend $2 million studying the thing. Get your bureaucrats who you're already paying to look at it as part of their regular day job.
Oh, yes, there will be junkets then. They will have to go to Sao Paulo, Brazil to see how it's working out, and La Paz, Bolivia, where I think they use cable cars to move people around as well.
And the way they fund it, too, in other places sounds much more sensible. We've talked about this before, where you integrate it with housing, with condensed housing. So you have a beautiful condo tower that has a shopping mall in its underground plaza with the SkyTrain or a cable car running through it.
Yes,
and
have the developer pay for the station.
Ding, ding, ding. People will do it because that's how they want to live. We don't need to put this on the backs of the taxpayer and nickel and dime them.
Well, Kris, of course, you and I could talk forever about these subjects, but we don't have forever in our time frame. If somebody wanted to suggest things to you or discuss them, what should they do?
We would love to hear from them. They can email me directly, and it's the letter K for Kris, K Sims, SIMS, at taxpayer.com. They can also go to our website, which is taxpayer.com. And we started this conversation, Jim, by saying that, at least from my perspective, I don't think many people are happy with the results, no matter if you're Liberal, NDP, or Flying Monkey Party. If you're not happy, don't lose hope. Always plan for the next election, and even if your guy or your gal or your favorite party didn't win your local riding, it is now incumbent upon you to stay on top of the issues. So always keep up with what your MP is doing, keep up with what the federal issues are, and phone them. Be firm but polite, please, because otherwise you won't get heard. Send that email. Attend that riding meeting. Be a really active citizen, because that will not only improve your member of parliament, it will improve your own experience of your local democracy, and maybe next time around you'll want to pitch in and get involved, and your favorite party might win. That's how this works. So I just wanted to give people that bit of hope that even if your favorite didn't win, that doesn't mean that hope is lost. You can still work for the change you want to see.
Saw something on a coffee shop outdoor wall that said, whoever, what good is it 6 people sitting around a table talking about an idea? Well, most great ideas started that way.
Exactly. Absolutely. There's a million great ideas that started exactly that way. And we can have those little conversations around our tables across the country. And that's how things change. So I just encourage folks. You can go to our website. We've got a good template there on how to write a good letter, how to make that good phone call, no matter who you vote for. And you'll feel better for it.
Kris, thank you again.
Thank you for caring.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website, taxpayer.com. If you have any questions for Kris, and we do, by the way, before we go.
Oh, yes.
Our listener says, I love listening to your comments along with Jim Goddard. And you've mentioned in the past that you used to be in journalism. Is there anything that would make you go back to doing journalism and working in a newsroom again?
Wow, that's a great question. Yes, for most of the last 20 years, I was a journalist, including in the Parliamentary Press Gallery. I don't know. I never say never about anything. I will say, though, that this has been my most favorite job ever, working at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. When we say we're grassroots, we mean it. We've been around for 30 years, and we have more than 235,000 supporters. I hear from them all the time. It makes my day. It gets me up in the morning. And you know what? I think that we still are in journalism, and that includes you too, Jim. What we're doing here right now is journalism. Journalism isn't dying. It's just changing. And so whilst the mainstream media newsrooms that you and I worked in for years are unfortunately emptying, I would guesstimate that for every 15 reporters that would have been in, say my talk radio newsroom back in the day, there's maybe 2. That's a problem. But podcasts like this, shows that we see online, YouTube, really in-depth conversations and good interviews with smart people, those are exploding. And so I don't think journalism is dying, it's just changing. And so to answer your writer's question, thank you, I think we're still doing good journalism.
Again, I've been speaking with Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We will ask questions on your behalf if you send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.